people for us to do a class action suit, because we looked into that. Another distinction is the rubber room. You know, the rubber room and the use is two different things. You know, the rubber room for people that may have had diabetes cases and things of that sort, and they're sometimes blended together. And as far as the EWAs, I do not agree with the EWA. I have no intention of signing EWA. If I happen not to become the president of the teachers union, I know that I will be at one of the worst schools in the city because I'm a rabble rouser, I'm a troublemaker, and that's where they're going to stick me. So we need to be prepared to talk about this movement that Mr. Ripley speaks of. That movement starts now. We have to not sign these EWAs. We have to be prepared to be uncomfortable. You have to be uncomfortable for a year or two, because we're in some great buildings, but we have to be willing to leave that great building to make a point and set a precedence, and then work our way back into that building once we get our job done. And then when we start to do these type of things, this is where our movement really becomes the strong movement that we need, so that, you know, Christie sees, you know, Tammy's not working in Newark anymore. These people are no longer going to be harassed, intimidated, and bullied.
So we can really talk about teachers and how the union can help teachers, but in addition to protecting teachers, the NTU also protects some of the NTU's non-instructional staff. What are your concerns? What are their concerns, and what will you identify and address their concerns? So, what are some of the concerns that you feel some of the non-instructional teachers have, and how will you go about it?
Well, I think the issues are the same. The non-instructional versus the instructional, they have the same complaints. They have the complaints that there's no parking, so I'm a minute or 2 minutes late. They have the same complaints that my principal isn't fair. They have the same complaints that the attendance improvement plan speaks to, after your 5th absence, you get a letter stating that you've been absent 5 times, but it's a non-punitive letter. They have the complaints that that non-punitive letter is being held against them in competency 5, which means they're going to lose points on an observation. Then they're going to fall probably in a partially affected area. I don't see a distinction between being a teacher, an aide, or a clerk in the realm of defending them and assisting them in their due process, because it all falls under the same umbrella. Because Cammy and her minions, they have no rules. You know, if I can get rid of a clerk, that's somebody I'm getting rid of, and I can bring in another consultant. If I can get rid of a teacher, that's someone that I'm getting rid of, and I can bring in another consultant. So Mr. Ripley spoke about us not having awesome union reps in our buildings, which we should. The one thing I would do is we need to get our union reps, we need to train our union reps, because it's not an on-site type of job. You know, they need to have specific strategies, specific skills, for which they employ when they go up against certain things. And we don't have that. You know, I don't know any union rep that sits and reads the Title 18 book, so that when they go into a conference, they can say, oh, well, go to Title 18, 6C, 3.5, you can't do this. And they're not gonna. So the union's job is we have to start to, like I said, it can no longer be top down. It has to be bottom up. And we need to start teaching the masses, because the more people that are educated, the less things that can be done. Because the common complaint I hear is, oh, well, I didn't know. You know, well, when the last time you opened up your union book? Oh, well, I never looked at the union book because I got a union. Ripley's my union rep. Well, I got to read the book. And that's part of the apathy and that mindset that we have to get away from. It has to be each one teach one. And once we can get this powerful movement of people all on one accord, once that occurs, our issues become less and less.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about this union is that we have little different interest groups within the union. We're not all teachers, there's guidance counselors, there's clerks, there's social workers, and each has a particular little set of concerns. And of course, the goal is to have them all looking towards the whole, but at the same time, they obviously do have particular concerns about work environment, whatever. I mean, I know the clerks have not gotten a good raise in years. They're unhappy with their pay. Some were actually bumped out of positions over the summer, and a lot ended up leaving. I forget the details, clerk 1 and 2, those titles. I'm worried about guidance, quite honestly, because, you know, Cammy is going after any non-essential personnel. I I'm worried she might just roll in one day and say, oh, we don't need half these guidance counselors, let's get rid of them. And of course, unfortunately, we already let her set that precedent 2 years ago when she laid off all the attendance counselors. So, I mean, we need to be very clear. That was a moment where we needed to take, I think, decisive action. When you're laying off 50-some people in a city which has crazy attendance issues. I mean, even in my building, Science High, there's plenty of kids with more than 18 absences. So I can only imagine what it's like in some of the neighborhood schools and da-da-da. So the reality is we should have taken decisive action then to stop her from doing it. We should have also taken decisive action to stop her from like moving and moving union reps in some cases. I mean, we allowed a snowball effect to build up, and we didn't take any decisive action at any point.
I'm sorry, can I respond to that?
We would like to, we are short on time, and we're also going to open up to any questions that anyone else has, so we just want to go through some of the questions, and if you have anything to keep it for your republic.
I'll take that as a no.
So moving along a little bit, so let's talk about NTU changes now. You can make some of the changes as the president, if you feel like you have those abilities. How long do you think it will take to implement the changes you consider most important?
I mean, I'll go first, I guess. You know, to do some very basic things, we could do them in the course of months. But the reality is to rebuild the culture of the NTU and reorient it for the real challenges that we face. It's going to take at least years. I think we could make a good start in 1 year if we had a sort of functioning executive board with the president who has some vision for what needs to be done. I think a year is a good timetable to get to a point where we can maybe start to take decisive actions on things. But the reality is to rebuild this union is going to take 4, 6 years. You know, it's going to take a while. We need to be very, very honest. Unions didn't sprout up overnight. The sense of solidarity that workers had with one another didn't build up overnight. You know, the battles they fought took years and years to fight sometimes. So the reality is we need to expect the same thing. We're in the middle of a long war, and you know we're sort of building for battle. So I would say at least a year for any real substantive, sort of solid cultural changes to begin, and then maybe we can really start building to get some momentum behind us after that.
I think that short-term things, I think we can get done maybe in 8 months to a year, as Mr. Ridley stated. I don't know if it'll take us 5 to 6 years. No. I think if we hit the streets hard, and the people see that it is a new union, and they see that the leadership is not the old ball and chain leadership, I believe that people will be willing to come out, and that they'll be willing to get on board, and they'll be willing to get on board quickly because it's something that they want. So I'm going to say 3 to 4 years we can really have a movement going, but it has to be done strategically. You know, everyone has to be a part of it. We can't just look at certain aspects. We have to take into account the community, because the community is the most important factor here in getting all of these people, because they only have that vested interest in their child. You know, they always say union people, we're worried about dues, we're worried about membership numbers. But parents, grandparents, all they're worried about is the education of their kids and where they're going to be. They don't want them on the streets. So we need to truly get our teachers on board. We have to get the community on board. We have to get the community groups on board. And I think once the ball starts to roll in and they see that this is truly a different Newark Teachers Union, that they will get on board and everyone will start to work as a team, which will shorten that time down. You know, we can no longer be divided. We can have differing views, we can have differing opinions, but the ultimate goal has to be the same. And as I said earlier, we have to be willing to sit at the table and talk to one another and make sure that our goals are in line. And you know, we fight at the podium, we fight at the panel, but behind closed doors, we have one mission, which is to rebuild this teachers union.
My next question would be, how do you think that the NTU budget should be distributed? What's more important and what's less important?
the biggest bulk of our budget goes to dues. It goes to dues to AFT National, and it goes to dues to State Federation, which is AFT New Jersey. What we have to realize is that we haven't had, we've been paying 1.1% for the last 20 years, I think since 85. 85 was when the last dues increase occurred, and unfortunately things have gone up drastically. And the budget's tight. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I'm the Secretary of Treasury. You know, the budget is tight. It's like we're living hand to mouth. You know, our reserves have gone down. Pete Patino, God rest his soul, who was the backbone of the union for a long time, never stayed home. He worked every day, and when he passed, a big chunk of money from reserves went to pay his estate for all of his time. So I think if there was some way that dues could be lessened going to national and state fed, that would be a big plug. I'm a firm believer in unions, and you cannot lower someone's salary. So if someone is making a certain amount, you cannot come in and say, okay, you're going to be 15 grand less this year because we're a union, and it's unfair. I think we need to sit at the table, we need to brainstorm. You know, the elephant in the room is that people don't want to hear that dues may have to go up at some point. You know, we pay 1.1 and may need to go up to 1.3. I don't know, but in order to sustain this union, drastic things have to be done. And unfortunately, or fortunately for President Del Grosso, he got out at the right time because he doesn't have to deal with what's coming down the pipe. We have to deal with it. Whomever is at the helm, whether it's Mr. Rigby, myself, or Mr. Avalon, you know, we have to make these tough calls. So we have to talk to the membership. We have to get the membership's input on it. We need to be transparent about the budget, which is something that hasn't been going on. You know, everything has been hush-hush. And, you know, we need to get their input so that when we make a decision, like I said earlier, it's not myself or Brandon making a decision. It's the membership making a decision. And, you know, we have to move forward based on the decision of the whole opposed to one.
I would like for Ms. Ripley to answer, but after that, or for even if what you're going to answer now, can you give us more specific about like what are certain things you feel like the budget should be used for,
Sure.
or should be like used less?
Sure. Well, I actually want to say that it might be that we get into office and we realize that the budget is such that we have to raise those dues a little bit. That's not unrealistic. I mean, we are under vicious attack, for 5-6 years now. 4 or 5 years, I guess, under the Christie regime, but it was starting before then. So I mean, we have a lot of ground to make up. So that's not unrealistic to think that we might have to raise dues a little bit. But again, that would be made in an open, transparent, and democratic fashion. I mean, the staff might need to be sort of reorganized to do different things. They're in the process of unionizing themselves right now, as a matter of fact. So we will have to negotiate fairly and openly with that staff at the NTU, and that's something that should have been done long ago. I mean, we have 2 custodians who work down there, and security guys do a great job, and they don't get paid enough. They're trying to raise families, they're taking second jobs. So the reality is they're great guys, we want them to be loyal to the NTU, how do we keep them? We should be creating some sort of pay scale, just like teachers get. NTU members have a pay scale. Why don't the NTU, staff members have a pay scale? So I think that's something that they're already in the process of pushing for. That's not exactly answering your question. I think a big thing that needs to happen is that we really need to figure out where we can use money smarter. Right now, we're getting killed with legal fees because we're defending all these tender cases because we've let things get too far. We are being reactive, not proactive. We've got to find different ways to fight on the front end so that teachers don't get in such a deep hole that we then have to spend $20,000, $30,000 on Zazali and Zazali law firm, which is milking us dry. They're making lots of money. They're bleeding us dry. And I understand why we're doing that because Tammy is relentless and her administrators are relentless, but we need to find a different way to fight. In our buildings, we need to unify as staffs and figure out ways to support one another and to stand up to bad administrators and aggressive administrators. And it can't just be the union president, it has to be the members in the buildings in combination with the union president or organizers or staff members. But we gotta find a way to spend less money on legal fees. I think the bulk of that money should go into membership organizing and mobilization. We have got to have organizers actually going into buildings, getting members active and helping them figure out how best to fight these battles prior to lots of tenure cases coming down. I know that's hard to avoid at this point since we're 2 years into this now, and this is the first year she's really going to go after people this spring, but we need to be more proactive on the front end rather than reactive with legal fees on the back end.
So we have talked about how a lot of a big portion of our budget goes to paying our dues for the AEFT. So my question is, how can we maximize our relationship between the two NTU and the FTA as a whole, since we pay a lot of money to be part of that association? Teachers do.
We actually have it's funny because we've had a whole bunch of AFT folks roll through 1019 Broad Street over the last 4 or 5 years in various positions and guises. Of course, for a while they were supposed to organize the charter schools. Then for a while, we gotta be honest, they were pushing a contract on us. And then we've had a couple others since then who are meant to do internal organizing and charter school organizing. And right now we have a great AFT guy, Ryan Williamson, and you know, he's a helpful guy, he wants to be active. So I think the relationship is already there. And I think the AFT is, more importantly, they're obligated to assist their locals if the local, and in a place like Newark where we're under such concerted attack, we're gonna have that relationship. But at the same time, I think we can maximize it better. The area I think it would be best focused would be on organizing the charter schools or trying to. But that doesn't mean by themselves. A lot of times they think we'll parachute in some organizers, mostly white kids who are in their 30s, and stuff like that, and they're gonna organize, charter school teachers, but they don't even know the city. I think it should be in conjunction with NTU members who are active organizers who do know the city, who know the school system, who know the history. But if you pair up an AFT organizer with an NTU member who's lived in the city and knows the city and taught there for 15, 20, 25 years, then you have them going to charter schools, organizing charter school teachers, then you have a real shot. And I don't know if you all noticed, but Labor Notes magazine, which you should all read if you don't, just published a story on how there's a whole bunch of LA teachers at a big charter school chain in LA wanting to organize right now. Okay, like a few thousand of them. I forget the exact number. I have the article in my bag. But the point is, we can leverage the AFT there for help with organizing new members. We got to do our own internal organizing. We can't expect Ryan or any AFT person parachuting in from the outside to do that. We got to do our own work there.
Sure. We talked about a lot of our budget going into the AFT, and the question is, how can we maximize the relationship between NTU and the AFT?
Well, as Mr. Griffith said, the relationship is already there. It's actually a very good relationship. We just need to, like Mr. Griffith said, we need to maximize. I agree that we cannot bring in people and just send them out into our buildings because it's not genuine. And our members are smart people and they ask the right questions. So as a union, it makes us look bad when we send people out from the AFT and they can't answer those questions. Then they come back to us, and it's like, well, you sent this guy to my building, he couldn't answer anything. So we have to, when we bring those people in, they need to sit with the members, as Mr. Ribby said. They need to be paired up with people that know the city, that know that have the answers to the questions. They need to go out in pairs. Unfortunately, that has not been the case, and because it hasn't been the case, it has made us look bad on a couple of occasions. But I have seen the AFT to always be there when we needed them monetarily, for people resources, as they should be, because they do get such a chunk of our dues. It benefits them to be there for us. Because, we don't have to be AFT. We can always look to go to NJEA, and that's something a lot of people say, well, we should just go to NJEA. Well, if we go to NJEA, it changes our freedom that we have as a standalone union. So,